in, please.
We at this time probably have a training program that would be the envy of most, or if not all, correction systems in the country. We are requiring that officers be trained in 5 weeks of pre-service training now. They then get on-the-job orientation and then 13 weeks of on-the-job experience, and then they come back to our academy for an additional 2 weeks of training before they can be certified as correctional officers.
15 new cases per day in the country, with a doubling rate every 6 months.
No, it's not San Moritz, Switzerland, or Vail, Colorado. This is that other winter wonderland, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, near the Northwest Expressway in MacArthur. That's one of several parts of the city that received snowfall last night. But for some people, it wasn't pretty. It was a mess.
Well, I was driving last night, and I was doing about 20 and slid off the road, and then I did a donut. Then I just went off in that creek, and that was it.
Farrell isn't the only person who had problems. You have the feeling whoever drove this car didn't intend to park it in a ditch either. So why is it that Lake Hefner Junior High football fields are covered with snow? Ice Station Zebra, otherwise known as the National Weather Service, says the fields, like other areas hit by snow, were located near generators that produce steam.
All this steam going into the air, which was quite cold, and it was capped by this inversion, it couldn't do anything else but fall out, and it fell out in the form of snow. To some extent, it was induced by the city. It was induced by human elements.
Of course, some businesses are hurt by the bad weather. Only 2 people battled the elements here at Lake Hefner Golf Course. You know, I really can't believe that Jerry Adams and Bob Berry would play 36 holes on a day like this. Bill Ross, Action 4 at Lake Hefner Golf Course.
Flames and billows of smoke were shooting through the roof as firemen arrived at the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity house on the OU campus this morning. No one was injured during the 3-alarm blaze that began in the basement of the house. The flames quickly ripped through the structure, charring more than 75% of the home. Damage estimates now exceed $500,000. Firefighters had a difficult time putting out the blaze.
The fire was in the walls and in areas where it was hard to get to, and it never did really flame out on the sides where the exposures were. They contained it pretty well on that side.
Jerry Lee Turner was the only one in the house when the blaze broke out. He escaped without injury.
I couldn't breathe, and I opened my eyes, and I couldn't. Everything, the room was filled with smoke, and I couldn't breathe or nothing. And so, first thing I thought, this can't be a fire. And so I opened the door, and I tried to get out in the hall to see if anybody else was in the house, because the guy's across the hall, and I couldn't even get out in the hall because of the smoke and everything. And so I shut the door back, and I grabbed my coat, and I climbed out the window and slid down the side of the roof.
Once the blaze was under control, the Phi Psi fraternity brothers rushed in to salvage some of their possessions. Since classes don't resume for another week, only a handful of the fraternity members had moved back into the house. Fire officials are still investigating the cause of the fire. Debbie Mash, Action 4 in Norman.
If there was a word for the day amid all the pomp and ceremony, it was caring. George Nigh took time out for making history as Oklahoma's first governor to secede himself to make a silent statement about the handicapped. The singers of the national anthem were blind. The sign language interpreters were deaf. Action positive has been a keynote in the Nigh administration. The second term officially began on the same note of optimism and motivation. Nigh called on the people of Oklahoma to get involved in an old-fashioned Oklahoma barn raising.
When neighbors came in to raise the barn, to help out, a barn raising, a church raising, I called upon the people of Oklahoma today in this January of 1983 to participate in the world's largest barn raising in the Oklahoma tradition.
Many of the people at the ceremony had helped re-elect George Nigh. Many of them will continue to support him during the next 4 years as governor. After that, Nigh has hinted he will leave public office for good. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, at the state capitol.
Early on in Oklahoma, these dotted the landscape. The windmill is an historic testament to a sometimes forgotten beginning. Agriculture, and farms like this one, once dominated the economy in the western part of the state. But in the 1980s, something else has taken over. The oil and natural gas business brought great wealth to the area. Findings in the Anadarko Basin, the hotspot for the industry, prompted investors to stand in line to get a piece of the action. But a few companies got over anxious, and that's where the trouble began.
There was a lot of false, a feeling of false economy, you know, and false hopes, and a lot of people jumped into the oil field that should have never been in there. Just because the buck was there and it was there to be made, and it slowed down, and it's tough right now, you know.
This equipment yard illustrates just how tough it is. 6 months ago, more than half of this equipment would have been in use. Now it sits idly by, waiting for the next surge in drilling.
Rigs like this one were what brought workers down from the Northeast looking for employment. There were steady job opportunities available for a while, but things have drastically changed now, and many workers are painfully aware of that.
Many of the rig hands who lived in Elk City stayed in mobile homes, like this one. Tim Allen moved with his 2 boys from Missouri to Elk City in search of a job. He found one on a rig. Last June, he was laid off, and he still hasn't found work.
You just don't know when you're going to go back to work or anything. I mean, unemployment's all right, but that only lasts for so long, and then you just kind of stuck. Okay, I'll see you later. Okay.
Have a good day.
About last December, I came down here because I had friends that were working in the oil field down here. This was really the only place that they had any jobs at the time. Just paying bills and keeping up is basically the big problem. We get by. We don't go out as much as we used to before. And I never thought it'd slow up like this. You keep hearing, the rigs are coming back, the rigs are coming back, but about this time, I think everybody's just about to the point where they're blaming, no, it's not going to be like it ever was, and you'd be lucky to get a job on a rig anymore.
Many of the rig hands, like Tim Allen, are staying in Elk City. They firmly believe that the industry will pick up again, and the high-paying oil-related jobs will return.
Workers from the Whittaker Children's Home were at the Capitol en masse today, visiting with lawmakers and taking pride in the reputation of the Children's Home. Last week, Human Services Director Henry Bellman confirmed that Whittaker could be closed. The workers were letting lawmakers know they are upset. But they are upset not only as workers hearing talk of closing the school, but as residents of Pryor upset about talk of the old school housing a regional jail.
The overwhelming feeling in Pryor, America is that they don't want a prison there. And this facility was given by a gentleman named Whittaker about 1907 or 8, about statehood, for young people. I think that's the way he'd still want it.
The state workers arrived at the Capitol late in the morning, and some of their lobbying had to be combined with lunch with legislators. Bellman is supposed to make his final recommendations for changes in human services tomorrow. On Friday, there will be a public hearing in Pryor about the Whittaker School. It will be up to lawmakers to decide which of the recommendations to follow and which to lay aside. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 at the state capitol.
Until legislation came in through the House of Representatives and Mr. McCorkle's bill, we were the most efficient child care center in the state of Oklahoma, and that's record. We think we would like to have a chance to have people come and view us, look at our record, look at the school and the job we've done, and we think we're capable of a continuing process that'll be meaningful to the state. After looking at California and their group home system,
Hello, Lori. How are you today? We're going to check your teeth to see if you have any cavities.
Dr. Jim Hammock is not being paid for his Friday afternoon work. Hammock, along with 22 other Oklahoma County dentists, are volunteers in a new program to provide dental care to handicapped children. Many of these children taking advantage of the program might otherwise not receive the proper screening to spot cavities or diseased gums. From its inception, the response from volunteer doctors was very surprising.
At our last Dental Society meeting, we asked for volunteers, and we got the names of 22 dentists from the local and surrounding community to participate in aiding and screening.
The new program gives the children a free screening only. Additional dental work is not included for all children. Some can qualify, though, for discount service. Children's Center officials say the dental program is icing on the cake and complements a variety of other programs there.
Within 2 or 3 weeks, it will be fully organized, and we'll be able to offer a fairly wide complement of screening and evaluative services in vision, hearing, speech, language, dental screening, and scoliosis screening or spine screening services.
If you'd like more information on the program, call 848-7603. Dan Slocum, Action 4.
Women have always been important to the Baptist Church. Their voices are the mainstay of nearly every Baptist choir.
Perhaps God has spoken to your heart concerning God's will in your life.
In Oklahoma, no woman has ever served as a Baptist deacon. Deacons are the church's problem solvers. They minister to the congregation, handle church business matters. Oklahoma City's First Baptist Church has 45 active male deacons. Last night, the congregation voted to change its bylaws to allow women to also serve as elders. Several Baptist churches across the state have considered allowing women deacons. First Baptist is the first to make the bold move.
The fact that in the New Testament, in the book of Galatians, it is said that in Christ there is neither male nor female. The principle, as it was discussed last night, being that a person ought not to be disqualified for any service in the kingdom of God by gender. Whether they're male or female is a minor matter. In terms of service to Christ, all people are equal.
The decision by First Baptist to allow women to become deacons in their church will not affect other Baptist churches in Oklahoma, but it will force other congregations to re-examine the role of women in their churches. Scott Wallace, Action 4, downtown Oklahoma City.
The Star School explosion resulted in some of the toughest school hot water heater inspections Oklahoma has ever seen. Since the tragedy, about 4,600 hot water heaters have been inspected for safety. That accounts for 58 of Oklahoma's 77 counties. State Labor Department officials say they plan on visiting the remaining schools in a few weeks. There have been a number of faulty parts discovered at some of the school boilers. And a few school administrators feel the inspections can be very difficult to pass, but are still very glad to have the hot water heaters checked.
Schools have never had an inspection program of this magnitude, of this severity, ever before in terms of their hot water heaters. So we knew that we would encounter a lot of problems, a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstanding. We believe that the children of the state, as well as the teachers, the support personnel of the schools, live and work and play in a safer environment that they ever had before, at least as it concerns hot water heaters.
Taylor says his department wanted tougher inspections before the Star School tragedy, and adds no one can erase what happened a year ago, but the state can and is doing everything possible to make Oklahoma schools safe. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
Traffic on the Broadway extension moved slowly this morning, but it wasn't because of the weather. Traffic on the extension moves slowly most mornings because so many people are trying to get downtown. All the snow and ice was on the side of the road. The highway itself was in good shape. But there were icy spots elsewhere, especially on bridges and overpasses. Shortly after midnight, this truck crashed through a guardrail on I-40. The driver walked away unharmed, and this morning crews were examining ways to flip the rig back over. Most of the accidents were similar to this one on Northwest 50th over the Broadway extension. Spinning and sliding on an icy street caused two cars to run together. It may have been aggravating, but at least everyone involved could drive away. Bill Ross, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Senator, there has not been an act done since
1941 is the Bonita and Supply and the only... Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I pointed out to the committee, there were, according to the State Library that did some research for me, there were 866 sterilizations committed between 1932 and 1941. The vast majority of them were out of the state mental hospitals and the State Institution for the Mentally Retarded in Enid. There was only one prison inmate. And I'm not sure it would even be constitutional if it were tried today.
Senator, there has not been an act done since
1941 is the information I got from the state line. Years, and I don't see any reason why it should be on the statutes. And there are people here from the upper...
Senator Combs moves Senate Bill 15 to receive a due pass recommendation.
I have no idea how it was passed. It must have been prior to 1932 because that's when the record shows the first sterilization was done. I didn't even know it was on. Somebody pointed it out to me in 1979, and that's when I started to... I filed a bill then. It didn't get through the House. I'm going to try it again. It's definitely archaic, and if it hadn't been used for 40 41 years, why does it need to be on the books?
On January 31st, former District 1 Oklahoma County Commissioner Ralph Adair is scheduled to stand trial in federal court. Adair is being charged with 19 counts of kickback-related charges. The former county commissioner is just one of many past and present officials implicated in the county corruption probe. Because the county scandal is now familiar to many Oklahomans, Adair's attorney doesn't think Adair could receive a fair trial in the state. The defense contends publicity of the scandal has formed a bad image of commissioners. At a change of venue hearing today, Adair's lawyer called several witnesses to the stand who testified county commissioners are automatically associated with corruption in Oklahoma, and that any Oklahoma jury can't help but be opinionated.
Purpose of our psychologists testifying about the social behavior of these people was that as much as they want to and as much as they say they can, they really can't. That once they've got inside them that county commissioners are guilty of kickback, and that's been reinforced over this time, that they would like to tell the court that they want to be truthful with the court, but the fact is they can't do it. And once they get in the jury room, those old beliefs will come back and will prevent Commissioner Adair from having the presumption of innocence.
Federal Judge Luther Eubanks says he will take all the testimony and evidence presented today under advisement, but as of now will not order a change of venue until he is fully convinced Adair cannot get a fair trial in Oklahoma. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
The police are trying to solve some of the problems in northeast Oklahoma City by introducing a new presence and a new image. The hope is to symbolically bridge the gap between the black community and the police. But for the grand opening, only the community leaders were there. Police officials expressed assurance that as the day wore on and the football game drew to an end, attendance would pick up. City officials say the problems here are not unique to Oklahoma City or to the northeast side.
For the most part, people, not only in northeast Oklahoma City, but all over, only come in contact with the police when it's something negative. And if indeed that happens to be a traumatic situation, then it spreads. We're attempting to talk from both sides. It's an educational program, and it's also a human relations program.
It's difficult to say how this neighborhood and others like it will react to this latest effort by the police. Distrust is a problem here, and the police admit that it goes both ways. But police officials are hopeful that they can see positive results from this program within a month. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 in northeast Oklahoma City.
Payment in kind is designed to raise prices and reduce government stockpiles of surplus grain by giving farmers grain for idling land. The Agriculture Department has no official estimate of how many farmers are likely to enroll in the PIC program, but USDA officials hope participating farmers will pull about 23 million acres of farmland out of production this year. Canadian County farmer Marvin Novak says he supports the program.
Looks to me like that this would be a good program to take off of both ends of our surplus. We'll not produce so much and then take some out of storage too, so this will really help us. We understand that we are able to graze out this 30% or make hay out of it, whichever is most feasible for us.
What will you be doing?
Well, we're planning on doing both things. We're going to graze out part of it and we're going to hay part of it.
Novak says this may not be the sole answer to the farmers' problems, but it's a step in the right direction. Reagan supporters say once crop supplies are back in line with demand, prices paid to farmers will climb. Ben McCain, Action 4.
It is the slowest year many Capitol observers can remember in the past decade or longer. Lawmakers simply aren't making that many laws. Just slightly over 200 bills have been introduced since the legislature got underway earlier this month. That's opposed to 4 years ago, the heaviest recent year recalled when nearly 500 bills had been introduced by this time. But 1979 was a good economic year for Oklahoma. 1983 is not.
There have been a lot of bills introduced, or drafted, requested, but they just haven't been introduced. And I've got to believe that the financial picture has some bearing on this. Of course, a lot of these programs take money, and they know that this is a bad time to try to fund a new service.
The shortfall of legislation should mean lawmakers can more carefully consider the bills before them. It will also mean more careful research and preparation of the bills by the support personnel. Nearly everyone hopes that will make state government a little more efficient and effective. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, at the state capitol.
Some 230 Department of Human Services employees are finishing up their last week here. After tomorrow, the employees will be laid off. The department is trimming the budget by reducing staff at Oklahoma's teaching hospitals. Even though the layoff announcement was made 2 weeks ago, the thought of unemployment is still frightening. Janice Connor doesn't know what she'll do now.
It was kind of scary. I've never been laid off before. It's one of those things, when the economy's like this, you can't expect anything else.
The cutbacks only affect support personnel. Hospital officials say layoffs were made in areas with the least possible effect on patient care services and educational programs. Hospital security is an area losing several workers. Officer Julia Moore, like most of those being laid off, had only been working for DHS about 6 months. She talks about how the layoff will affect her.
There's a lot of sadness there, and it's depressing, to know that, because I like working anyway, and I like being a police officer, and to realize after the 27th that I'm not going to just have some days off for a few days and then turn around and come back to work, it's very depressing.
Most of those laid off will look for other jobs, while they hope there's a slight chance of being called back to work here. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at Children's Memorial Hospital.
So that we should see influx of money coming the latter part of April and into the first part of May that will partially restore our trust fund to a better level in relation to potential liability.
Just a year ago, General Motors was producing more cars than consumers were buying. But now all that's changing. Second shift GM employees will be returning to work to fill back orders. Instead of a surplus, some dealers now have a shortage of new cars. GM car dealers around the state report car sales for January are up almost 30% over last month.
8 or 10 months ago, we had more cars and trucks than we knew what to do with. And right now, we're down to where we just don't have a whole lot because things have really been picking up. And we've got loads of 83s coming right now, and we're just waiting for them to hit.
Claus says the GM Celebrity and S10 Blazer are the biggest sellers. He says low-interest financing has been a big boost to sales, big enough to spark new activity in the auto industry. Debbie Mash, Action 4 in downtown Oklahoma City.
have ignition. We have ignition of the solid rocket boosters and liftoff. Liftoff of America's space shuttle, and the space shuttle has cleared
the Space Shuttle Columbia. It launched the United States into a new era of space travel. It's a valuable tool, and it takes experienced scientists and technicians to get the craft off the ground. When the shuttle touched down in the Mojave Desert in April of 1981, a dream of over 10 years was finally a reality.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
It's a long way from the Mojave Desert to Central State University, located here in Edmond, Oklahoma. But what a lot of people don't know is the Space Shuttle program owes a great deal to this institution, and it all began with the education of a very special student. This is Milton Helfand. He's one of the top men associated with the Space Shuttle program, and he's a graduate of CSU. He's come back to lecture some classes at the university. And although he's heavily involved with what some call the most important technological breakthrough of the century, he still looks at himself and his job modestly.
As far as local boy made good, that's debatable. I've had a very good time and have very, very much enjoyed my job. And if it weren't me doing what I'm doing, somebody else would be doing the same thing.
Helfand wants to get the point across to these students that a degree is vital in today's high-tech world.
That degree gives you the ticket to go after some of these very neat jobs.
Helfand is not on a lecture tour, but he sees this as a chance to share with students his years of experience, to hopefully better themselves and possibly the country as well. Kevin Ogle, Action 4 in Edmond.